From WHYY and Billy Penn, it is Hittn season. Hey there, podcast pals. I'm John Stolnis from The Good Fight and Billy Penn. You can follow me on X at John Stolnis. Coming up, Phillies take 3 out of 4 from the Washington Nationals over the weekend. A feel-good series, but a little bit of what happened on Sunday afternoon, leaving a bad taste in some folks' mouths. And Phillies maybe missed an opportunity to head out to Atlanta on a real humdinger of a game on Sunday. But we'll talk about that coming up. Yes, I used humdinger in a sentence in the year 2024. That's just that's how this is going to go tonight. We're going to talk about some things John Middleton said over the weekend that I thought were pretty interesting. And the parity throughout baseball is really something else right now. We'll go over some of the numbers in just a few minutes. Joining me, as we do all the time on this Monday night podcast, whenever it is we decide to do it, Justin Klugh from Baseball Prospectus, the Dirty Inning podcast, Absolutely Hammered podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Justin_Klugh. You can find all that other stuff over at our Hittn Season Patreon, which is patreon.com/Hittn Season. Justin, what's up, buddy? Hey, it's Monday night. We're here doing the thing.
Is the Humdinger the name of the speakeasy you used to go to during Prohibition as a teen?
I feel like, I want to get away from the references to me being older than you, but then I throw out a humdinger of a line and I snap myself right back in. I can't.
With no Phillies tonight, I did want to say I can bring you some New York baseball news.
Okay.
One, the Mets were up 3-0. Then the Orioles scored a run. Then David Peterson tried to quick pitch an Orioles batter, but instead balked in a run to make it 3-2. And on the very next pitch, Ramon Urias hit a solo shot to tie the game at 3-3. The tragic part is, of course, that the Mets did go on to walk-off victory. Francisco Alvarez walked him off, so bummer. But incredible Metsing in the moment. Exquisite. And additionally, a little Yankees promo I saw today on what all of their players consider their favorite apps informed us that Aaron Judge's favorite app is Maps. So that got me wondering, what do you think Bryce Harper's favorite app is? And I think that it is Settings.
Settings, yeah. Is there now? I guess the question is, what does he do when he's in Settings? Is he fixing with the screen brightness? Like, is that his go-to? Is he testing out different alarm settings? Yeah, making sure the Bluetooth is off. Do you think he's a guy who does when his battery's low, he goes to the reserve battery, kind of thing, conserving battery, pauses all downloads until he's on the Wi-Fi kind of a thing?
You're asking if I think Bryce Harper ever goes into low power mode? No, I don't.
Fair enough. That's a good point. No, I think that's right. Well, that's interesting. I think that's a question that needs to be asked of Bryce. Maps is your favorite app, you're bored, you're in the bathroom, you're doing a number 2, you got your phone, and you're thinking, what am I in the mood for? Oh, let's find out what the topography of Tokyo is here on the Maps app. That sounds like a really fun thing to do.
Look up the address of the first house I lived in as a kid, and then just trace my finger around the roads of the neighborhood.
Yeah. How long would it take for me to get from Phoenix, Arizona to my childhood home? I wonder.
Right.
Dude, who doesn't wonder these things?
As the batting coach is pounding on the bathroom door, being like, "Aaron, you're up, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Get off.
We all get it. Maps, super addictive, but you got to get out there.
You got to get off. Maybe his has games on it. I don't know, but it's weird. All right, let's talk about this weekend series with the Phillies. They take 3 out of 4 from the Washington Nationals. Got off to a real great start with the Phillies winning the first 3 games of the series. Of course, it felt like a little bit like August of last year when it just seemed like every game in August of last year had these huge milestone, you'll never forget where you were when it happened moments. And there were a couple of great moments. We've talked about them on previous podcasts. The Kyle Schwarber Grand Slam game was on Wednesday, and that wasn't against the Nationals. That was against the Marlins, but all part of the 4-2 homestand the Phillies just finished up. Thursday, they had the Weston Wilson cycle, as you and Liz talked about. Trey Turner with the walk-off after the Phillies blew a 2-0 lead in the ninth. Trey Turner comes up and almost hits a walk-off grand slam, but continued his hot hitting. And then Christopher Sanchez on Saturday with the complete game. Just a masterful performance. I think it was, did he finish under 100 pitches? Or it was right at 100 pitches for a complete game?
I think he was 99. Didn't he jump right up against the, yeah.
It's like I think they call that a Maddox, right? It's a Greg Maddox. It's a complete game under 100 pitches. And then, so lots of feel-good moments from the weekend. And the game on Sunday, like the pitching matchup was certainly in the Nationals' favor. Taijuan Walker against Jake Irvin. When my son Ethan joined me on the podcast last week to break this series down, that was the game he predicted that the Nationals would win. He said, I think they'll win the last game because Jake Irvin's having a good year. Taijuan Walker is, of course, Taijuan Walker. But the way the game finished up is what has been the topic of conversation here in Philadelphia over the course of the last 24 hours or so. And if the Phillies are down 6-4, Matt Strahm and Jeff Hoffman give up a run in the 8th and the 9th innings to give the Nationals the lead, and we'll talk about the bullpen in a little bit. But you have Edmundo Sosa leads off the bottom of the 9th with a single, and that brings the tying run to the plate. And Cal Stevenson, who, great AAA numbers, it's Cal Stevenson, right? 11 plate appearances with the Phillies. And Bryce Harper is sitting on the bench with the day off, and Cal Stevenson is allowed to continue walking to the plate to take this at bat. I mean, I can't imagine Cal Stevenson could believe that he was being allowed to continue hitting in the moment. I'm sure he had to keep looking back. Like, no, you serious? You really want me to? Oh, okay. And Stevenson grounds into the double play. Garrett Stubbs grounds out for the last out, and the Phillies lose 6-4. If Harper comes to the plate, there's no guarantee. He probably doesn't hit a 2-run home run. They probably still lose the game. But the process behind this, Justin, is mind-blowing. After the game, Rob Thomson said he told Harper he was going to have the day off. And apparently in Rob Thompson's mind, that means you don't get up from a seated position the entire game. This is so... There is no reason for Bryce Harper not to have pinch hit in the 9th inning. And I get, and we'll get into this, I get that it's not just a simple matter of going and grabbing a bat and getting up in the batter's box. There's a process that a hitter has to go through when they're going to come in the game as a pinch hitter. But it's the whole idea that here in late August, as you're fighting for the top spot in the National League for home field advantage throughout the playoffs, that you're going to just tell your best player when there's an off day the following day, you're just not available. And you also said the same thing to your catcher, JT Realmuto, which I understand a little bit more. Catchers are really, you're back behind the plate, you're getting beat up. I get it. You want to give JT Realmuto the full day off. I understand. Bryce Harper, you're telling me he can't start to warm up in the 6th inning to get ready for a potential pinch hit appearance late in the game when he doesn't have to take the field? They had other options. He wouldn't have had to play the field if it goes into extra innings. I love Rob Thomson, Justin. There is absolutely no good reason why Bryce Harper shouldn't have come up in that situation instead of Cal Stevenson. None whatsoever.
I also love Rob Thomson, still in his corner. When the time comes that the airwaves are dominated by when should the Phillies fire Rob Thomson talk, which, happens with every manager eventually, this will be a thing that somebody's going to point to as part of the overall argument.
This is the kind of thing that people complain about with him. Yeah.
Right. You don't really typically get fired as a manager for one particular moment. You get fired for being the kind of manager you are. And he is, we have a pretty good idea of what kind of manager he is. And that's why the players like him. That's why we like him. I'm still of the mind that Thomson knows how to manage these guys and they like playing for him. But, this was a moment where... You definitely thought, Cal Stevenson, like with his head full of distracting thoughts about everything the settings app can do for you, having Bryce Harper just told him about that on the bench. I do think that you absolutely use Bryce Harper there. I see the value in letting guys know exactly when they're going to have time off. We know they do this. This is something I think that's very unique that Thomson does, is let guys know pretty far in advance, you're going to have this day off.
Yeah.
And if that means sticking to that plan, even as circumstances change, in which using that player who you said would have the day off is now the most ideal scenario, then how can a PTO request stand up to that kind of pressure? Like, Bryce is told, you've got a scheduled day off this day. Okay. Does that mean he's what? Not doing any prep in case he has
Correct.
To play? He's actually... is there a physical risk? Did he not stretch or familiarize himself with the pitchers?
I was listening to Ruben Amaro talk about this on the Philly Show podcast, and he was essentially saying, these guys, when they know they're going to play, they do massages, they're eating differently, they're doing different things to prepare themselves to play that day. And when they're told they're not going to play, they have the day off. It's especially if Rob Thomson told you under no circumstances are you playing, he probably doesn't do all those different kinds of things. So
this is a flaw in this system, then,
Yeah.
I would say. Like, that doesn't quite work, especially, and I would say almost exclusively, for Bryce Harper. Like, he is here for that moment.
Yeah.
You're saying, he probably wouldn't have hit a 2-run home run. Here's the thing. Nobody probably had a better chance of hitting a 2-run home run.
Of course not.
On that Phillies roster, or
Right.
of the Phillies available
he's
hitters
the
in that moment.
ideal guy. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no one else you'd want in that spot.
Right. So, I get there's a difference between an off day and an off day with the addendum of you're coming off the bench if we need you. But based on everything we always hear about how much this team wants to win, shouldn't he, again, even if he's the only one, be ready to come in at any time? Like, I'm not putting blame on him, for the record. Not
Right.
at all. I'm
Right.
not. I'm just trying to think of logical reasons why putting Harper in for that at bat was an absolute no-go.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about strategy or matchup. It was about the fact that he had an off day. And Thomson just didn't want to call him into work. I don't know. I think Harper's got to be ready to go at any time. And knowing the kind of player Harper is, he would have been. It's not like he would have been like, nah, Skip, you told me I had the day off.
Right.
What are you doing? Like, I'm playing Fortnite in the clubhouse. It's not like he would ever say no in that situation. So It's got to be Thomson just sticking to the plan, which in this case, no, I don't think this was the right move for the Phillies to win that game. And, going into that game, it was also like, when the Phillies are out there, when the Phillies aren't clicking, which they haven't been. I know we're saying now they have won, 4 in a row. They won 4 in a row, 4 or 5. That's good. That is better. And I do think they're kind of like out of that little downturn for now. But this also feels like a game they go into, and it almost is like, oh, well, we won the first 3.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly and that's the thing that Rob Thomson gets hammered for most, I think, by the fan base, is that it does appear at times as though there's a lack of a sense of urgency with him. We've talked about it before on the podcast, and like I said, they have a grueling stretch of games coming up again. The schedule has been most unkind to them here in the second half after they got an easy schedule the first half of the season. They're going to Atlanta for 3 games, and Atlanta has problems of their own. So it's not as tough a series, hopefully, as maybe it would have been. But, fingers crossed, it's Atlanta. It's always tough to play there. And then you got to go to Kansas.
Sidebar on that, by the way.
Yeah.
Austin Riley out for 6 to 8 weeks. I saw it described as he's out for the season, but are they rephrasing that as 6 to 8 weeks because he could be back for the post? Season?
Yeah, so 6 weeks takes you to like the last day of the regular season. So there is the possibility that he could be back for the playoffs if he's out for the rest of the regular season, though. I mean, there's just, unless there's a miraculous recovery and he's back in a month, But he's going to miss these next 7 games against the Phillies.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, having witnessed the back and forth between Phillies and Braves fans for the past few years, and like just knowing how that argument goes every time, I was initially like, oh man, imagine if the Phillies win the World Series and the Braves are having this kind of year, which is a staggeringly bad luck year for the Atlanta Braves. I'm saying with a smile on my face. And their argument would be, oh, if the Phillies won the World Series, like, oh, you did it the one year like we didn't have any of our good players and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, that's fair enough. But I would say the 2 years before where we blasted through the Braves
on
when
our
you
way
beat
the Braves to get there.
To the World Series. I think we still have that number. So I just wanted to check in with you and make sure, when we're part of that group of people who's yelling at another group of people, we have our comebacks ready.
We'll have a retorts ready to go. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, you couldn't beat us the last 2 postseasons, so what makes you think you're going to beat us in the 3rd postseason in a row? You know what I mean? They
couldn't possibly say, oh, the reason you got to the World Series was because you didn't have to play the Braves because.
Right. That's never been a problem. No.
The Braves aren't the problem.
No, the Braves haven't been the problem. So just to kind of put a pin in the Bryce Harper thing, because I do want to move on. I don't want to spend the whole podcast talking about this, but it does speak to kind of what Rob Thompson's end game here is, and it's just basically the in general wisdom of telling a player. Essentially, what he did was he took 2 players off the roster on Sunday. He left them 2 players short by making them completely and totally unavailable under any circumstances at all. And we have a thing with our kids, like my wife and I have said, like, do not promise them anything that you won't absolutely follow through on. And we tell them, don't make a promise that you aren't sure you can absolutely follow through on. You can say, I'm going to really try. You can say, it's my intention to ... But if you promise somebody that you are not coming into the game under any circumstances, you do have to follow through with that. And I think that's one of the things the players like about Rob Thomson is that he keeps his word. He means what he says. He does let them know ahead of time. So, but I mean, you're in the dugout. You're wearing the uniform. Like, if you really want to give him the day off, just tell him to stay home with the family. Like, why are you at the ballpark in general? Because you are a non-functional person in that particular moment. I mean, I guess
why isn't he in the parking lot doing push-ups? Was
right.
my question.
Well, here's the other thing too. What if somebody gets injured?
Oh yeah.
What if somebody what if, same thing with like, JT Realmuto and Garrett Stubbs. What if Stubbs gets hurt? Realmuto. So I imagine they've got to be doing some kind of preparation to potentially play in the game if something bad happens, even though they've been told they're gonna get the day off. They can't they can't have a situation where JT Realmuto does absolutely no baseball playing preparation on these off days, because it is very possible Garrett Stubbs would get hurt. That the catching position is just general. You're going to get knocked around back there. Yeah. And who knows, Alec Boehm suffers an injury, gets hit on the wrist by a pitch, or he strains a hamstring, which has happened to every player on the roster this year. It seems like who's your first baseman? Is it maybe Edmundo Sosa plays there in a pinch, but it just doesn't make any sense to me that you would tell your best player that you just make him completely unavailable. And he wouldn't have had to play in the field because you still had Weston Wilson. You still had Johan Rojas, who could play for Cal Stevenson if you pinch hit for him. So really all Harper needed to do was be ready to hit in the ninth inning. I'm sorry. Yep. I think you have to, as a manager, you can have the intention of giving him the day off and say, it is my intention for you to do as little as possible today. But if you're here, we may call on you. I just think that has to be the policy. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. Otherwise, just tell him to stay home.
First of all, you made me think of my own father's. I remember overhearing him talking shop with some dads. But it was the opposite. It wasn't. I don't want to overpromise with my kids anything I don't think I can get. It was. I don't want to overpunish my kids in ways that I have to pull back on. I remember. I don't know why I remember him saying this. I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be hearing this, but he was like, "Oh yeah." I try not to issue the punishment while I'm still mad, because then I'll say you're grounded for 1,000,000 years, and then you got to pull back on that, and that's just a moment of weakness. And I remember being like, so there's a system, interesting. Yeah. But also, I'll go back to this: that Bryce Harper is kind of like a one-of-one guy. Yeah, it would make total sense if Rob Thomson was like, this is how we're going to do this. We're going to have a system where you're going to know way ahead of time if you have a day off. It's more of a office culture thing than a professional baseball club thing, but we're going to do that because I think that's going to work. And I think the players like that.
They like
I think
it.
that is something that they like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see him, pulling Bryce Harper aside and be like, hey man, obviously none of this applies to you. It applies to you in that you'll be told when you're going to have an off day, but you're Bryce Harper. So if we need you to get in there, you're going in because you're Bryce Harper. You understand that, right? And Bryce Harper would go, yep. And that's it.
Yeah, $330 million. I mean, I don't like to throw that around.
Talk about the money. Bryce Harper not only is most likely to hit the home run in that case, not just because he's good at hitting home runs, but because of that moment. That's his moment. That's Bryce Harper's moment right there. That's not Cal Stevenson's moment. If it was Cal Stevenson's moment, he'd be making $330 million.
Right, exactly right. So again, this is, and it's no guarantee the game would have ended any differently. But we talk about process over results sometimes. The process here was terrible. And if this was May, okay, it's August 18th when this game was played. You have a half a game lead on the Dodgers and a 1 game lead on the Brewers for one of the top 2 spots in the National League. I really want that bye. I don't want to play the wild card round, given how much parity there is in the National League this year. Get me past that wild card round right off the start. And if you fall a game short, again, this isn't a game where they had it in hand and they didn't play Harper and they blew it. It's more likely than not they lose this game anyway. That being said, I don't want to see this again. I don't. We're
definitely going to, but I agree.
I don't want to. So that's all. That's it. I think we've. Again, we both really love Rob Thomson. I think he's a really good manager. But I think he's wrong in this instance. Not that it matters what we think, but
this is short-term, not long-term criticism.
Yeah. So just before we get to some stuff from John Middleton, just looking at the rest of the weekend, Trey Turner got hot, 10 for 17. Had the walk-off hit on Friday night. I was looking at the numbers. He could back his way into the batting title this year. He still doesn't have enough plate appearances to qualify for the batting title, but he will, I think, at some point in the next few weeks. And right now, entering play on, Monday, 311 batting average leads the National League. 309 for Mookie Betts and Marcell Ozuna. Luis Arias is at 305. And, hey, there's Alec Boehm down there at 6th place at 296. But it'd be interesting for Trey Turner to, after, that immense struggle that he had over the last 5 weeks, to still lead the National League in hitting or batting average is really pretty remarkable. Do you think he gets it done, Justin?
I'm incredibly into this. Yeah, I think he can totally get it done. He's as streaky as anybody in the lineup, but he is fully capable of getting it done. And I am all on board with this because of the fact that you will be told he can't win the batting title. He missed like a month of at bats. That's not, you can't do that. And I just want to be able to point and say, well, he did it. I don't know what to tell you. There's nothing better than winning, like hitting a milestone like that, being the best in a season like that, except for, as you put it, backing into it in a completely almost accidental way where you are just like, yeah, he won the batting title. He missed a month, but he still won the batting title, and everyone just tries to throw that in your face. But like, no, he got it, and it was the legitimate amount of at-bats. He just, he was out for a little bit because baseball players get hurt. Ask the Braves.
And I don't really believe he backs into it, but it's just kind of one of those things where it's like he's nowhere on the leaderboard, right? Nowhere to be found on the leaderboard, and then people flip open, go onto the stats page of whatever it is website they use. I was going to say open the newspaper to the box scores, and of course nobody does that anymore. What's a newspaper? I know.
Did they have those at the Humdinger?
I used to read the Daily Humdinger, and that's where I used to get all my box scores.
He's not backing into it as much as he's sprinting full force into it, really.
And going to be jumping up from behind a rock and saying, surprise, I'm the batting champion,
Right, he's jumping out from the bushes, whacking the current leader in the knee, and then sprinting across the finish line.
He's totally Tanya Harding this thing. That's what he's doing. It's really good to see, So, was it Jeff Galooly, I guess, is the one who actually hit Nancy Kerrigan. Again,
okay. Did you read that in the newspaper?
in the Daily Humdinger. It's all in there. It was the periodical of record at the time. So, yeah, that's yeah.
So Stolnis is like 7 years older than me, for the record.
It's not that much. It's not that much. I do want to talk about a couple of things. Let me talk about the bullpen real quick before we get to the John Middleton stuff. I was surprised by these second half numbers from these guys. The Phillies went out and they got Estevez, Carlos Estevez. They got the left-handed dude who I can never remember the name. I want to say Blake Parker. Tanner Banks. I know it's not Blake Parker, but Tanner Banks. It is
not Blake Parker.
It is not Blake Parker. But
it's a different guy with two last names.
Exactly. It sounds like a kid in a mid-90s sitcom show for kids, like Blake Parker Can't Lose, something like that. Or
it sounds like a kid in a Disney Channel original movie about a kid who wants to play baseball, but his dad is a wealthy financier who's like, there's no time for games in your busy school schedule, Tanner.
You're going to be a pilot. But yeah, some of these numbers are crazy outside of those guys. Jeff Hoffman has a 5.1. I'm cracking myself up. Jeff Hoffman in the second half.
Pilot isn't even that bad, honestly.
No, it would be great to be a pilot. It would really, really be cool. I don't know why he would be upset about that. I can be a pilot, really?
Oh, man, I have to fly cool planes around? Oh, dang.
I wanted to play baseball before, but now that I know I can be a pilot. Second half, Jeff Hoffman, 5.11 ERA. Matt Strom, a 4.76 ERA. Orion Kerkering, a 6.55 ERA. And Jose Alvarado, a 5.91 ERA in the second half. Two of those guys were all-stars. Alvarado has not been right all season. Kerkering, it seems as though hitters are kind of just waiting out his sweeper and smashing that to smithereens. They went out and they got, these other two guys to supplement these four guys who are supposed to be like the backbone of this bullpen. These guys are supposed to make the game much shorter. They're supposed to be really hard to beat this Phillies team and score on them after the sixth inning. And that hasn't been the case. These guys have given up home runs. Strom has been wild. Alvarado, you never know where the ball is going. they can absolutely turn it around. I mean, they've got the pedigree to do it. They pitched great in the beginning of the season, with the exception of Alvarado. But we know Alvarado can turn it around in a heartbeat as well. It's just it's concerning, and I don't know. I don't know what is causing it, or outside of the fact these guys are just giving up a bunch of home runs and leaving pitches over the middle of the plate. Again, baseball is just one of those sports where you just oftentimes don't have any idea why a guy suddenly loses it. But Hoffman all of a sudden has given up dinger after dinger after dinger.
Yeah, as far as trust goes, it's not that I've lost faith in the bullpen. It's that I've readjusted my expectations to think this is going to be a rougher ride. I want to say guys like Hoffman and Strom, they were too good not to regress a bit, but that they can find their way back. And I do think that's possible, but I think you're right about Kerkering. It's like, it's not that it's over, but he's been figured out essentially by hitters, and
he's got to make an adjustment.
Yeah, and that makes him less of a trustworthy asset coming out of the bullpen. And you're right about Alvarado. He's just the guy who's like, I don't know what's going to happen next. Let's just let's get out there and see. And that's a guy who's going to make your life a living hell in the postseason. You want to see Hoffman and Strom turn it around, but I mean, again, bullpens are terrifying. You really have no choice but to just kind of white knuckle it through the second half. And these guys were all playing at such a high level. I mean, the Phillies had like 5 relievers who were like, great, this guy's coming in. Like, not sarcastically, which was crazy for a long time. And that was too good to last all season long. And I think that's true for any team that has 5 really good relievers in the first half. I would love to see the numbers on how many teams with a good bullpen had all the same guys performing at the same level from the first to the second half of the season, but also were able to do that from like one season to the next season, because that's just not how bullpens work. Yeah, like you have noted in our stat sheet, Jose Ruiz hasn't been scored on in the second half.
He's been their best reliever.
So that can happen. It can happen the other way too. So that's just the nature of relievers. But you really established a lot of trust in guys like Hoffman and Strom, and to see them giving up the home runs they weren't giving up before, it does. It damages your trust. So I would say it's not that I think, oh boy, the Phillies are going to the bullpen, this one's going to get out of hand fast, but it is like, okay, well, strap in, because this could get a little dicey pretty quick.
Yeah, and I've seen some people on Twitter saying, well, Thomson overused them in the first half of the season. That's not what happened at all. They did not get overused in the first half. In fact, the Phillies bullpen in the first half had the second fewest innings pitched throughout the whole first half of the season.
Right, well, that narrative's dead. Good luck, Twitter.
No. So, I mean, they pitched quite a bit. I mean, but they didn't pitch any more than other relievers get used, because the Philly starters go deep into games. I mean, they do. So they did not get overexposed. They're just struggling right now. Maybe having the All-Star break would have been good for Strom and Hoffman. I don't know. Maybe, they've been different pitchers since the All-Star game. Maybe not getting that break was a little bit detrimental to them. I don't know. Just trying to find reasons for it. You're right. The only thing you can do is just keep pitching them. They're your guys. They have to be the guys that get you to October, and then they have to be the guys that get you through October. The good news is they have great stuff. They've all done it before. If they start locating again, they are going to be dominant. And that's what all you can do is hope and wait for that to happen, because there are no alternatives. There are no other fixes out there. These are the guys. These are the guys that got you this far. These are the guys that are going to have to get you to the finish line. You just have to cross your fingers and hope.
Yep. Estevez was supposed to be the boost, and he has been good, but he's the one who gave up the store before the Trey Turner walk-off. Yeah. So it happens. You got to just hope it doesn't keep happening by guys making adjustments.
Right. John Middleton was asked about the struggles the team had over the last month or so before this last week. And some of the stuff he said I thought was really interesting about the struggles and about his role as an owner. And we haven't really talked about Alumni Weekend at Citizens Bank Park. I want to get into that in a couple of minutes too. But he was there for Alumni Weekend, and I want to say, I wondered if what you thought of this comment, whether or not you thought he was taking a shot across the bow at Rob Thomson and the way he has handled some of the losing streaks. He said, I don't think you can just sit there and say, oh, well, this has happened and therefore we'll turn it around. I don't think you can be that passive. I think you have to be pushing people to rethink what they've been doing. That's coaches and that's players. everybody has to step back and say, what are we doing wrong? Why is it a team that was winning at a 700 clip for 3.5 months is now playing at a 325 clip for the last 5 weeks? He's as confused by the extreme Jekyll and Hyde nature of this baseball team as everyone else. And he should be more clued in than the rest of us. But it seems, I think that's one of the reasons, another reason why people have issues with Rob Thomson is that, again, having a stoic demeanor and maintaining a calm and even keel during tough times is oftentimes a very good thing. I think in life, that's a very good characteristic to have, not to overreact and to be foolishly, just do things for the sake of doing things when things are going bad. That being said, sounds like John Middleton to me is saying, like, Rob Thompson's a little too passive when things start to go down this road, and that maybe something should be done to change things around to kind of get teams out of the rut, because it doesn't make sense to him like it doesn't make sense to us why the team goes from being a 700 team to a 350 winning percentage team.
Yes. Something needs to be done. But you'll notice in these stories that Middleton never says what that thing is.
That's true.
Which is the thing that Thomson needed to do, but nobody knew what it was, but he had to do it, including me. My advice was to do a team-building exercise. And when we talked about this, Liz said, well, no, they just need to go see their families. And I was like, that makes sense, too, honestly.
Yeah.
But that was missing from this. But I'll give Middleton this. In Zielecki's write-up, he describes Middleton as a fan. This is not the first time the Phillies' principal owner has been described as a fan. He is a fan. I believe he's a fan. His seats are a lot better than yours, but he is a fan. And I do believe that, for at least for now. He is motivated to be a fan, and as a fan, he thinks like a fan. So we may not get let into the same parties or clubs as John Middleton. We may not have the number for a charter helicopter or have as good health insurance. We may not have the kind of wealth that allows for our sons to pursue careers as movie producers. But we are also fans. So it's not surprising that Middleton had the same reaction as me and many other Phillies fans when it came to week 4 or 5 of that rough patch. Even broke it down like week to week. It was like, okay, this is a rough patch. Okay, this is a pretty rough patch. Okay, this is like a decline. Yeah. Okay, something's got to be done.
Yeah, are these guys just bad now?
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Like, we went from thinking, is this a slump or did they just become a different team? Because remember, they weren't not hitting. They were among the worst hitters in the league.
Yes.
In this case.
All of them.
That cartoonish drop was, I think, an indication of how not real it was. At least I'm hoping. But it went on for long enough that it got everybody's blood boiling. And you're just helpless as a fan. You're just watching. Middleton. Watching from, I assume, a throne made out of bags with dollar signs on them, was also just watching. You know,
is he the Riddler?
Powerless. He's a Batman villain. A cigar-based Batman villain.
Yeah. I just had Jim Carrey as the Riddler in my head as you were describing that. But go on.
The Middler. Oh my God. Anyway. But yeah, he's just as powerless in the moment as we are when he's watching these things happen on the field. Now, the difference is he could do something really drastic if he really wanted to, but I think it would be against the advice of every advisor he has to make a dramatic change to the Phillies or force himself into the clubhouse and send notes with how he wants the lineup to go. There was an owner like that in baseball once. The players all laughed at him, and then he got banned from the sport. His teams also won a ton of World Series titles. But still, my point is that Middleton sounded like a fan because despite all of the many economic differences between us and him, he is one.
Yeah.
You just have to hope that doesn't mean he's going to assert himself in a moment of panic. Thankfully, none of us have that power. Now, again, I kind of don't want to have this debate, but I do feel like I need to address it. We're assuming the Phillies have pulled out of it, and I think that's a fair assumption. I think this series in Atlanta should go, you know, it's in their favor, even from before the first pitch, I think, for obvious reasons. But I will say that, you know, the doing something argument still makes sense, even though, again, no one can really say what that was. But that's why you have a manager. A guy who's running this clubhouse, a guy who knows these guys, a guy who might have some deputies that we know or don't know about on the roster, you know, whatever various dynamics a clubhouse can take. The manager, especially a guy identified as a player's manager, should know what that thing is. And I guess Rob Thomson either did something we don't know about with his players. They did have that meeting. We don't know. Or he decided the best thing to do for his players was to let them play until they played out of it, which seems very on brand for Rob Thomson. He seems to see that as the solution all the time.
Yeah.
So I guess I totally get the instinct to be like, someone has to do something. But the fact that none of us could identify what that something is indicates that, what was there to do? Maybe that something wasn't the thing to do. Maybe the thing to do was what he did, which was let him keep playing and win 4 or 5.
I don't know if it was last week on the podcast where we were kind of talking about some of the different options, lineup shakeups, sending somebody like Bryson Stott down to the minors for a week to work on his swing. Something that would be as dramatic as it gets, like something.
Yeah,
drastic.
let me ask, what is too drastic for you? Like a lineup shakeup feels not that crazy, honestly.
Yeah, Bryson
Stott getting demoted feels pretty crazy. Somebody getting like traded or fired is super crazy. So like where?
Yeah.
Where do you put the options?
I think firing like Kevin Long or Caleb Cottom, Caleb Cottom's been great, but I think firing something like that would have been a no-go. I think that would have been absolutely crazy. That would have been akin to like firing your defensive coordinator and then hiring some guy who was a failed defensive coordinator and head coach in other places to take over late in the season. Something that is too ludicrous to even comprehend, right? So I think we think of guys like Brandon Marsh and Bryson Stott as established superstars in baseball, when I think it's because they've got so much personality. They're the daycare. They have the ritual after the game. They're such an important part of the chemistry of the team and all that different kind of stuff. But it's also important to remember they're young guys in like their third year in the majors, young players who have struggled for an entire season, have been sent to the minors before to work on things. Like that would not have been. Bryson Stott has never made an all-star team. Now I grant you, he's been a 3 to 4 win player. So I mean, he was exceedingly good last year. But guys have had great years and then been awful the next year and had gone down to the minors. So that would have been shocking for them to do because it would have been totally out of character. But I don't think it would have necessarily been a huge shocker. Now not that wouldn't have been a huge shocker, but it wouldn't have been out of line, I guess, is how I would put it. Now, that being said, they didn't do that, and it seems as though Rob Thomson's approach to right the ship, to just kind of let things play out, is starting to work, but they lost a lot of ground during that stretch, and maybe nothing that he would have done. Taking sitting Trey Turner for 2 games, or changing the batting order around and having Trey hit like 7th or 8th when he's going real bad or something like that. Something, I don't know, may not have ever worked. And we think these solutions that we have in our heads are going to be the answer, and they probably aren't. But I think what John Middleton's hitting at is that like the vibe, the tone, everything coming from the team and the players is just like, we've been here before. We'll get out of it. We just got to keep playing. We just got to keep doing it. And then they go out the next night and they do the exact same thing. And it's on the pitchers, too. Like, we don't talk about the pitchers throwing balls right down the middle of the plate, not executing, putting the team in early holes. We focus so much on the offensive players and failing to hit with runners in scoring position. Not much a manager can do about Aaron Nola leaving meatballs over the middle of the plate, or Chris Sanchez walking 3 guys in 4 innings. There's only so much you can do. You're not going to make a show out of Chris Sanchez. Like he's just struggling. None of these guys are doing anything lazy. But I think one of the things that they had said at the end of that losing streak was that they'd kind of lost their way a little bit. The intensity level had dropped. They were getting down on themselves.
They said it was weird.
Yeah.
They lost that series in Oakland, or with Oakland, and I remember reading that story. They were like, things just feel kind of weird now.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because they lost, just like in that series. And
the intensity level from that Dodgers series, where they clearly just got up to a level, and then the A's came in, and you could just... It's like it's like the week before school lets out. It's the last series before the All-Star break. You've just passed your finals, right? You beat the Dodgers. You swept them. You blew the baseball world away. You're the unquestioned best team in baseball. You've got 8 All-Stars, 6 going to the game. You've just got this. You got to get through these last 3 days of school playing the A's before you can go on your break. And I don't think they ever dialed it back in coming out of the All-Star break that way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the older I get, the more I'm just like, yeah, it's not that I'm sitting here going, ball players, wow, just like us. But you think when you try to like relate to this situation. I mean, burnout is real. Intensity drops are real. You can't play at a high intensity level for 162 games. You just can't. You can't do anything for 162 games. You can't do anything for 30 games in a row. It's really hard to maintain that level of success. That's why everybody, all of the Phillies haters out loud and all of the Phillies fans quietly to themselves were like, this level that they're playing at right now, where they're just blowing everybody away and just winning every series and never losing more than 3 games in a row. It can't continue. And, it didn't. It didn't continue. And I guess I'll just loop back to what I was saying in the moment, which was I'm glad it happened when it did and not in September and October. Because, I mean, like I said, the cycle may have reset itself, and that would be really valuable to them because they've been kind of playing out. They had 2 pretty kind of similar seasons. Slow starts, hot middles, streaking into the postseason, beating those Braves I've heard about. And then, things just didn't work out at the end. So maybe it's a boon of sorts. Maybe just it's a different approach this year. I don't know. But it just happens because, you go to work for 162 days in a row. I'm sure you're not excited to be there for 162 of them.
Yeah.
That said, if they ever have a rough stretch like this again this year, I'm going to leave this planet.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We will get on the rocket ship together. And I was thinking about it too. It's like, I have slumps at work. Do you ever have slumps at work? Like, do you ever have like a stretch? I have found that with my work, I would have like
sections
every day. I can think about it. Like, I notice that I have like I'll have like a month or a 6-week stretch where I'm just making more mistakes. Like I'm forgetting details, or I'm forgetting to follow through on something, or I'm just not understanding a project or what was expected of me or something like that. And my work isn't great. And then I'm back, then I'm working at a good pace. I'm working quickly. I'm on top of things, I'm following through. My communication is better, but it occurred to me, like, I go through slumps in my work, which is ridiculous. Like, my skill level is the same. I'm still the same person. I haven't lost any of the skills that I had before when I was doing my job well. I'm not doing it well right now. Maybe it's because I'm tired or I'm burnt out or something. Who knows what it is? But I don't get to call a team meeting and psych myself out of it.
Well, you can, but you just have to go to the bathroom and yell at yourself in the mirror, and that's just going to turn more people off. So you don't. You kind of don't have that option. That's fair.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
So anyway,
the important thing is that they started winning again.
Yes, and it looks like they're on the right track. But now, Justin, they have another rough streak. We talked about it just a little bit right at the top. The Phillies are now in Atlanta for 3 games against the Braves. They're 66-58. The Braves, and part of the other thing about this really awful streak the Phillies went through, they got so lucky that the Atlanta Braves have had the stretch that they've had where they've struggled and where they've had injuries, and the Mets haven't been able to mount a serious challenge. I mean, they come into Monday leading Atlanta by 7 games still in the East. Like they're not, barring a collapse against Atlanta this over the next week and a half, these 7 games, they can bury Atlanta here over these next 7 games, like bury them. And I think it would be very disappointing if Atlanta isn't at least 9 games back, if not double digits games back by the time this is all said and done. It's a 3-game series in Atlanta, and then they get Atlanta for 4 games at home after that. So that's a chance you could win the National League East right now, this week. And then you're working on just trying to stay ahead of the Dodgers or the Brewers. I don't really care if they are the 1 or the 2 seed. Just beat one of those 2 teams out and get that first round bye. But then they got to go to Kansas City and play a Royals team that's 14 games over 500. That's going to be a tough place for them to win, I think. And then you get the Astros, and then they come home for a series against the Astros with 3 games against Houston, who are 11-4 in August, 17-10 in the second half. They're back to being the Astros. They're going to win the division, and they're probably going to make another deep playoff run. They are the Astros again, and then the 4 against the Braves. So it's a rough stretch here, Justin. I guess how are we feeling about this team? They're probably not early season Phillies, but it feels like we're seeing the real Phillies again, which means they're not going 10-2 during this stretch, but when what is it? 12 games, you go not 6-6, 7-5, 8-4. Can you do that during this stretch?
I'm not sure the Phillies will be as hot as they were at the beginning of the season again. I think they can certainly string together a bunch of wins and look like a much better team than they have for the last couple of weeks. But that might have been a height for this team.
Yeah.
They had a really favorable schedule, and they were beaten up on a lot of teams they should have been beaten up on. They were also beaten up on a lot of teams that were very good. They beat a lot of good over 500 teams. I don't want that to be that argument, but like they had everything clicking, and like you said, they were getting lucky. They can have those qualities again. The skill stuff are things that like adjustments like Christopher Sanchez lowering his arm slot, and looking like an effective pitcher again. I'll go back to that, honestly, that like the Schwarber grand slam on Wednesday, it was awesome, but all anyone was thinking was, okay, does that mean they're back? Like, that was one win, that was great, but does that mean they're back? The Weston Wilson cycle was like, yeah, that was very exciting, and that's a huge accomplishment. He should be very proud, and it was awesome to watch. But it was part of a bigger offensive attack, so I think the story was like, oh wow, all of the Phillies are hitting. This is great. The next night was a Trey Turner walk-off, which after Brandon Marsh's leadoff double was like, okay, if there's a runner in scoring position with no outs in the bottom of the ninth of a tie game at home, if we don't win this game, it's inexcusable.
Right.
Not impossible, but inexcusable.
Yeah.
So I come back to that Sanchez game because that was the game that really stabilized things for me. The most worrisome part of this slump has been that the fact that there just doesn't seem to be a starting pitcher who can go out there and not put the Phillies in a hole.
Yes.
From the All-Star break to August 14th, the Phillies starting pitchers had a 6.36 ERA in the first and second innings.
That
was
the story.
Fourth highest. Mm-hmm. Fourth highest in baseball.
Crazy.
Lower than only the White Sox, Nationals, and Rockies, none of whom are going to the playoffs.
No.
Credit to Zach Wheeler. He got back on track, I think, before the rest of them. But to see Christopher Sanchez come out after struggling and pitch like it's the first half again, and for the Phillies to, again, say that he hadn't been struggling due to fatigue. He had been struggling due to an adjustment he'd made or something he had started doing, and they lowered his arm slot and got him comfortable again. And it was incredibly stabilizing to see that. So my point is that, like, making that change is going to get you is going to be more helpful. And like, I'm sorry, what was the question initially?
Well, just like what are fair expectations for this team? Because it's 13 it's 13 games here against these three teams which you're playing. Yeah. My
point being that the adjustments can be made. Sanchez made them. He's now proof that, like, a guy can pitch like they were pitching before. An aspect of this team's success that is huge and kind of the spine of that success with how many games they allowed the offense to take its time or attack immediately, or however the offense wanted to approach the day. The starting pitching was like, go ahead, the door is open. When that stopped happening, this team really ran into trouble. So to see Sanchez make an adjustment, you get Suarez back, you see Wheeler pitching like, wow, he had an actually really dominant start and a couple of really solid starts. That was very encouraging to see. That is a huge part of this team's success. So seeing them down the line make those adjustments, I don't think they're going to make an adjustment that makes them as white hot as they were in the first half, but it means they can get back to a level of, we can win 7 of 10. We can have a great weekend. We can bury a team. Like, they are capable of that. They're not the team, just because they aren't the team that maybe they were at their height, doesn't mean they are the team they were at their lowest.
Right. If they're anything like the August Phillies of last year, that would be fine. And here's the thing about the Phillies too. I don't really think I'm torn as to whether or not the schedule, who they're playing, has as big an effect on them as maybe we think it does. Because
that's true.
I mean, they don't seem to. They've done well against the bad teams this year, but they also have a good record against teams over 500 this season. So. Yeah. I think they'll get up for this Brave series. I think the Royal series will be weird. They play weird against teams they don't usually play. So like they always struggle against AL Central teams because they never see those guys. And so I have a feeling.
Hey, I don't know if anyone told you this, John, but the Royals are having a really good season. I don't know how we could have predicted this or who could have told us this was going to happen, because nobody did. Nobody
saw it coming. Nobody saw it coming. Yeah.
I think that's going to be a tough series. I think that'll be a tougher series than the Braves series, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and then you get the
I
Astros.
don't actually think that's that hot of a take, to be honest.
No. I think you're right, and the Astros series will be a tricky one. Although it'll be at home, so I like
home is better. Yeah.
Yeah, home is better. I think it's interesting, and Jeff Passan, we'll finish with this tonight. Jeff Passan noted that the best team in baseball, the Phillies, are on pace for 95 wins. The last year, baseball did not have a 100-win team, was in 2014. So basically, the entire sport is the top teams are playing it close to the same level. I mean, there's like 6 teams that have all at the top that have virtually the same record. Coming into Monday, the Phillies were 73-51. You had 3 teams, the Dodgers, Orioles, and Yankees, a half a game behind the Phillies at 73-52. The Guardians and Brewers were 1 game back at 72-52. So you have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams, the 6 best teams in baseball separated by 1 game. A lot of parity in baseball. Does that make you feel better about the Phillies' chances, or does it make you feel like it is a complete and total crapshoot? No one has any idea how this is going to all work out.
That after all of this, all of the lamenting, and you got to fire Thomson, you got to fire Dombrowski, you got to clean house, you got to rebuild, like just blow it up. This is a waste. With 10 more years with Turner and Harper and everything, that we can sit here and accurately call the Phillies the best team in baseball is absurd.
MLB.com had them number 1 on their power rankings again today. So
I saw that. Yeah, the P stands for Phillies, they said.
Yeah.
I wish I had their headline writer's gig. In any case, yeah. I almost wish for a playoff picture like this, I wish this had happened, not almost, I wish this had happened when the Phillies were not a playoff team, because this is so interesting and kind of anomalous. As you said, we haven't had a Major League Baseball playoff picture without a 100-win team in it for about 10 years.
Yeah.
For 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Phillies are now playing in hard mode, based on how the season has gone. It's been really interesting. All these teams that were hot to start the year, the Guardians and the Yankees and the Phillies, they all kind of hit the same skid at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then all these other mid teams were like, okay, well, we're going to get a little hot. And they popped up a little bit. And there's, 5 weeks left of the regular season, so it was just enough to make it super interesting that there is just this giant mess of teams who are all playing at, as you said, at about the same level going into this September's home stretch. And I don't know, it's interesting. It just makes, unfortunately, the Phillies are in the playoff picture, so we have to we can't look at it objectively.
Right.
So they're playing in hard mode now. It wasn't always going to be a straight shot through the Braves and right into the NLCS. Things were going to change. This is why you should win the World Series when you're in it or close to it, instead of forgetting how to hit twice.
Right.
Now it's a mad peanut scramble for the playoffs, and you're going to wind up facing a bunch of feral kids who aren't afraid to meet God. So now you got to sharpen your bats into spears, because things are just going to get primal going into the postseason. And I think that's going to make it a lot tougher for the Phillies. I really do. You're talking about them being a 1 or 2 seed. Yeah, that's going to be way more important going down the stretch, because a lot of these teams are like, hey, if it's about who's getting hot, well, everybody's kind of hot. Everybody's the same level of hot. Yeah. We haven't seen this equality for a long time. So I want to be so interested in this, but I mostly just have to dread it, because I do think it is bad news for the Phillies.
I think it is too. You look at a team like the Padres, the Diamondbacks, they have just as good a chance to get to the World Series really as the Phillies do. I mean, they're super hot. The Phillies are kind of playing mid, it's who gets hottest at the right time. And that's one of the things that John Middleton also said that Pat Gillick told him. It's it takes skill to get to the playoffs in a 162 game season. It is luck to win a World Series. And that is evidenced by the...
Middleton was surprised by
Yeah, it's what are you talking about? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Because Middleton grew up when there were 4 playoff teams in baseball. In 1993, you had a National League East, a National League West, American League East, American League West. You won those four division title guys. They played in an LCS and a World Series. So
and you can get a drink at the Humdinger for 3 cents on the dollar.
Listen, I know the Daily Humdinger. I was keeping track of those standings every day, and along with the latest horse races. So it's just different. It's different now with so many different playoff teams, and it's one of the reasons why I think the parity is there. There are a lot of teams who are still all in on this season, because the Phillies and the Diamondbacks these last 2 years, made it clear to everyone, as long as you get in, you can get to the World Series if you get hot. And so teams were willing to take a shot at it. Most teams were willing to take a legitimate shot at it. So,
but it's always those teams that were just like, all we got to do is get in. Like those teams that said that, I feel like more often than not, they're the ones that have more success than the teams that are like, let's equip our war machine with the ability to blast through 162 games, and then the last 18 will be totally fine. And that doesn't seem to work. But now the Phillies are surrounded by a bunch of teams that are like, all we got to do is get in. And that's what I mean. There's this desperation, knife in the teeth, like vibe to all of these teams that are trying to get into the playoffs. And man, it's just super interesting. But
it is.
I don't know if I can enjoy it.
Yeah, it's going to make for a shaky last month and a half of the season. Some good news for the Phillies in terms of injury. Christian Yelich, the Brewers' best player, is going to miss the rest of the season with a back injury. So the Brewers took a big hit, but they're still playing well even without him. And Freddie Freeman is playing through a fractured finger. It's, again, some Phillies rivals here dealing with some injuries. And, of course, the Austin Riley injury may be the official death knell on their season. But we'll see. We'll see. The Phillies go into Atlanta. They're going to play the Braves for 3 games here to start off this quick 6-game road trip through Atlanta and Kansas City, and then come home for a 22 World Series rematch with the Astros, and then 4 more against the Braves. We'll see how this all shakes out. But anyway, Justin, as we finish things up here, it's time for final thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts to wrap things up here?
I'll just share this, not Phillies or baseball related, but tonight at the top of my Twitter account at Justin_Klugh, you can find a tweet where I am asking you to click my sister-in-law's Amazon link to supply her classroom with supplies for her students, as she's a teacher, and she's doing what a lot of teachers do, and just saying like, hey, here's my list on Amazon if you can help me out with any of these supplies. A lot of the stuff's like $7, $8, $12, you know. So if you're able to, it would be fantastic if you can help her out, fill her classroom with all the stuff that she is looking to supply her kids with this year. It would be fantastic. I would appreciate it, and so would she.
Yeah, it's really, teachers pay a lot of the money out of their own pockets for all the supplies that they have to use to teach and stuff. I know it's a big and they don't you don't get reimbursed for that, right? I mean, it's you're not making 6 figures to do it either. So
certainly not with money.
No, but you know what? But you do pay. You do, the reward that you get is all the time, the personal time you lose. You know, that's where the reward comes in. You know, so it's such a tough job, and teachers are amazing for what they do. So definitely, we'll do that. Make sure to go to Justin_Klugh is the X handle. There it goes. We missed Liz tonight. Liz feeling a little under the weather, but we will talk to her a little bit later on in the week. In the meantime, folks, that'll do it for this edition of Hittn Season. I want to direct you to the Hittn Season landing page, billypenn.com/Hittn Season. We weren't able to do the tailgate over the weekend. We thought it was going to rain on Sunday, Justin. You know, it looked like all the world, like Sunday morning was going to get rained out, and then it didn't happen. So we could have been out there, but we're going to do a make good in September.
You guys wanted to be in there for the alumni ceremony anyway.
Right,
you didn't want to be out in the parking lot with us. So, we're working out a different date, and we'll get to come out there and see everybody in September.
Yeah, we're going to do a date in September, probably a Sunday in September, so we'll keep you up to date on all of that. But for those of you who registered, just make sure to re-register, and those who didn't, we'll stop on by. We'll give you the details later on. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time right here on Hittn Season.